Welcome to the deep dive. Sometimes, the biggest insights come when you just flip an old idea completely on its head. Today, we're diving into a position paper that does exactly that. It challenges really centuries of thinking about redemption, about destiny. The paper is called The End of Diaspora, A New Path to Redemption, and it's by Lev Nemotin. He puts forward this argument that's pretty radical, honestly, but he argues it's becoming, well, self-evident.
Absolutely. And our mission today really is to unpack Lev Nemotin's central argument. He's saying that the whole traditional sequence, the Moshiah coming first and then the diaspora ending, he believes that's actually reversing right now.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and we want to dig into why he thinks this massive shift is happening, what he sees as the drivers, and what it all means. We'll cover the whole paper to get the full picture of his pretty provocative argument.
Okay, let's start with the basics then. The Jewish diaspora, the galut. It's been central to Jewish history for so long. What's the traditional understanding, historically, theologically?
Right, that's the essential background. So you look back to the destruction of the first temple, the Babylonian exile, and then definitely after the Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 CE, Jews were scattered all over the world.
Okay.
And this wasn't just seen as like a random tragedy. For generations, it was understood theologically as part of God's plan, a phase within the covenant.
A plan. How so?
Well, it was often interpreted in a few ways, maybe as a punishment, sure, but also as a period of preparation, a test for the Jewish people. Or some saw it as bearing witness to God's moral law among the nations, or even bringing divine awareness out into the world. But always, always with this core promise. One day, the Moshiach, the true Redeemer, would come, gather the exiles from everywhere, and lead them back to the land of Israel.
And history had some false starts on that front, didn't it?
Oh, definitely. Lev Nemotin mentions a few key examples. You had Bar Kokhba back in the 2nd century. His rebellion against Rome ended catastrophically. Then much later, Shabtai Zvi in the 17th century, a mystic whose messianic movement swept through Jewish communities.
Right, I remember reading about him.
Yeah, huge excitement, followed by terrible disillusionment when he converted to Islam. And Jacob Frank in the 18th century, another controversial figure. These figures misled people, sometimes disastrously, but the fundamental belief held firm. The Moshiach's arrival would cause the end of the diaspora. He'd rebuild the temple, bring peace. The end of exile was a result of his coming.
Okay, so that's the traditional view. And this is exactly where Lev Nemotin steps in and says, hold on, let's reverse that. This bold reversal. What's his core thesis?
His core thesis, and he states it very directly, is that the end of the diaspora must come first. It has to precede the Moshiach's arrival.
Precede it. Wow.
Exactly. He's flipping the cause and effect completely. And crucially, he argues this isn't just some, abstract theological idea he cooked up. He sees it as reflecting what's actually happening now. Jews aren't waiting passively anymore. They're actively fleeing danger and gathering themselves, specifically to Israel. He sees it as a kind of self-redemption already in progress.
So what's driving this? What forces does Lev Nemotin point to that make him so sure this reversal is happening?
He identifies several key drivers, things he sees as undeniable facts on the ground. First, he says anti-Semitism isn't just lingering history. It's a living, growing, and metastasizing force. It's active, it's spreading.
Where specifically?
Well, he points to Europe, saying despite everything, it's bristling with anti-Jewish hate again. The Arab and Muslim world, he knows, remain largely inhospitable. Which isn't exactly new, but it's persistent.
Okay.
But the real shocker for him, the most disturbing trend, is the eruption of American anti-Semitism. America, the place seen as the ultimate refuge, the Golden Land.
That's a huge claim. What examples does he give for America?
He paints a worrying picture. He mentions synagogues under attack, universities that he says are churning out anti-Semitic rhetoric, often disguised as political activism. He talks about Jews being demonized, their loyalty questioned, their very existence challenged. For Lev Nemotin, the feeling of safety in America, that assumed sanctuary status is, it's visibly cracking. He believes it's ceasing to be a sanctuary.
That is a stark assessment. So with anti-Semitism rising globally and America perhaps not being the safe harbor it once was, Lev Nemotin positions Israel very centrally, not just as a homeland, but he calls it the only logical, moral, and prophetic destination. Why so definitive? What makes Israel unique in his view?
He highlights Israel's strengths across the board. Militarily, he says it is unmatched in the region. Its defense capabilities are top tier. Economically, he calls it a powerhouse, pointing to its leadership in tech, science, innovation.
The startup nation idea.
Exactly. And culturally, spiritually, he argues, it is once again the center of Jewish life and identity. There's a vibrancy there, a focus of Jewish creativity and religious life he sees as unparalleled now.
So it's not just a refuge, but a thriving center.
That's his point. He describes Israel's transformation from, that once fragile state surrounded by enemies into a formidable global actor. He mentions its engagement with Arab nations, Africa, Asia. It's playing on the world stage now. And his conclusion from all this: Israel can protect its people, and it can protect the Jewish people. That ability to provide real, tangible security, he argues, is the necessary condition for redemption. If safety is eroding elsewhere, Israel's strength becomes paramount.
Which leads us directly back to his assessment of America, what he calls the American Jewish Golden Age. He seems convinced it's over. Can you elaborate on why he thinks the American Jewish experience has shifted so dramatically?
Yeah, he's very direct about it. He flat out states the American Jewish Golden Age is ending. He contrasts what he calls the slow-rolling anti-Semitism of the 20th century. Things like, being kept out of certain clubs or facing quotas, that sort of polite exclusion, with what he sees now, which he describes as overt hostility. He gives examples like Jews being shouted down on campuses, targeted in media, assaulted on the streets, and threatened in their homes. It's a shift from subtle bias to open aggression, in his view.
And is this just fringe elements, according to him?
No, that's a key part of his argument. He says the political mainstream increasingly tolerates, even endorses, anti-Semitic tropes, and he sees this coming from both the far left and the far right. But maybe even more worrying for him is the state of American Jews themselves.
How so?
He describes them as potentially, quote, divided, demoralized, and disarmed by their own complacency, still holding on to that belief that it cannot happen here. But he warns very starkly that history has always punished that belief. He sees a dangerous complacency, a failure to maybe learn from past diasporas. It's a really urgent warning.
It really is. So let's get into the theological core again. If Levny Moten is right, and this flipped script is happening, Jews returning before the Moshiah, what does that do to the theology? It sounds like it puts a lot more emphasis on human action.
It absolutely does. It's a profound shift. Levny Moten believes this act of gathering, this return by the people, is precisely what sets the stage for his arrival. It's not the Moshiach gathering the people. Instead, he says, the people's gathering calls forth the Moshiach.
So the people initiate it, in a way.
That's the implication. It flips the agency. He connects this to the idea that redemption in Jewish thought isn't supposed to be purely passive. He argues it's always been understood as needing to be active, requiring preparation, agency, courage. So if Jews just wait and wait, he suggests, they may miss the window. It's not just about patience, it's about responding to the times. But by acting, by making this collective return driven by necessity, the divine will respond. And he puts it incredibly clearly. Let me quote him again. When the last Jew arrives in Israel, and the diaspora is over not by miracle but by necessity, then the Moshiach will come, and only then.
Wow. Not by miracle, but by necessity. That's powerful.
It is. It makes human action, human response to historical forces, the direct trigger for what was always seen as a purely divine event.
So if the Moshiach's arrival follows the gathering, what does this mean for the actual Messianic age? Does Levny Moten's theory change what that era looks like, or just how we get there?
That's a really interesting part of his argument. Traditionally, the Messianic age is pictured with these grand promises: peace among nations, universal justice under divine law, a rebuilt temple, the end of suffering and death, universal recognition of God, huge world-altering events.
Usually seen as brought about directly by the Moshiach, right? Like supernatural changes.
Exactly. Often understood as direct consequences of his power or God's intervention. But Levy Moten offers a different lens. He asks, maybe these things aren't solely the result of the Moshiach's supernatural abilities.
Okay, then what?
He suggests they might actually be the consequences of Jewish unity in one land, under one destiny, with one purpose. In other words, the peace, the justice, the spiritual flourishing, perhaps these emerge naturally from the Jewish people finally being gathered, strong and focused in their own land.
So the Messianic age becomes less of a sudden miracle and more of a culmination.
Precisely. He frames it as potentially a natural culmination of Jewish survival, strength, and return. Not some mystical interruption of history, but its divine fulfillment achieved through the efforts and the reality of the gathered people themselves. The Moshiach arrives, perhaps, to preside over and perfect a reality that the people have already substantially built.
That puts an enormous weight on the actions of the Jewish people right now. It makes sense, then, that Levni Moten concludes his paper with a real sense of urgency, a call to action. Was his final message?
Yeah, he's very clear. It's not a sermon, it's a warning. The core message is, don't wait. Specifically regarding America, he says, do not wait for America to finish turning. The signs are already here. It's about recognizing the signs and acting before it's too late.
He draws on history for that warning, doesn't he?
He does. He explicitly says, Jews have always lingered too long in exile until the doors slammed shut. A very painful historical reminder. But he argues this time is different. This time, there will be no excuse, because the means for return exist. The gate to Israel is open, the Jewish state is strong, the people are ready, the infrastructure, the capability is there in a way it never was before.
So what is the call, then?
The call is to gather. But he frames it very specifically, not as refugees, but as builders, not as survivors, but as sovereigns. It's about returning with agency, with purpose, to actively shape the future.
A very different image from fleeing persecution.
Completely. And he lands it right back on his main thesis at the very end. And when the gathering is complete, then and only then, the Moshiach will come. He urges the diaspora to end with dignity, with faith, and ultimately with the Jews themselves bringing the Moshiach, not by waiting, but by coming home. It's a powerful, almost demanding call for self-determination as the path to redemption.
It really is a profound shift in perspective that Levni Moten is putting forward, taking a belief held for millennia and just flipping it. It forces you to rethink the whole relationship between destiny and human action.
It absolutely does. He lays out this future where essentially human agency becomes the catalyst for divine intervention. And it leaves you with this really provocative question. What does it actually mean for an entire people to actively bring forth their own redemption through collective action, especially, facing down historical patterns and the kind of global challenges we see today?
It really makes you think about the power and maybe the responsibility of collective will in shaping events we used to think were purely in God's hands.
Exactly. It challenges us to consider if maybe the path to fulfillment isn't just waiting, but actively building the future you hope for, step by necessary step.
A really powerful idea to reflect on. This deep dive into Levni Moten's paper certainly gives us a lot to think about regarding agency, destiny, and this potential reversal of a foundational belief.